So I'm not going to tell you that you shouldn't invest your wealth wisely. I'm probably not the guy to help you do just that, right, based on my portfolio or lack thereof. But the most important investments that you and I will ever make will not concern our bank accounts. Because Jesus goes on to say, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Think about it with me. The most important investments probably are not going to be with your head, but they're going to be with your heart. Sometimes, oftentimes, really, our investments in the kingdom do not make any sense to those who are in our world or by those who are swayed by worldly values and thinking. I was telling some guys this week about a mentor that I had who worked for somebody who owned lots of McDonald's. I mean, lots of McDonald's. And he went to the owner after working there for so long and gaining complete trust of this owner, and just said to him, look, I'm going to have to quit. And the owner was like, well, why do you need to quit? He goes, because my job is really getting in the way of my Bible study. You ever heard somebody say that? Well, here's something that you probably haven't heard either. So the owner said, look, don't quit. Let me sell off some of my McDonald's and reduce the load of work upon you. Because he thought it was better to keep this guy than to keep some of his business. And as the story pans out, this happened time and time again until there was literally one McDonald's left. And the owner just came to him and said, listen, do you want this? And my friend said, nah, I don't think that's what I want to do either. And went off and did something else. And again, God blessed him in that as well. But that's something that we certainly don't hear very often in our world, one way or the other. I got in trouble in the very first church that I was at, which I'm sure surprises all of you, right, that I would get in trouble. But I got in trouble. This is what I got in trouble for spending time with a kid that I saw potential in. I know, that sounds crazy, doesn't it? It did to me. I was brand new into ministry. I'm like, well, what are we talking about? I shouldn't be spending time. And I was told, listen, this kid, he doesn't really come here that often. His parents haven't been coming here very often. In fact, his parents at that point were unfortunately, unbeknownst maybe to some, but were really struggling and would eventually get divorced. And so I forged ahead on my own time and continued to work with this kid. And I'll tell you what, as I did, years later, here's at least the last I know of, that kid who's now married, very nice job with kids. But anyway, he's a deacon at that church. And yet, for so many at that time, it didn't what? It didn't make much sense. Let me ask you a simple question here. And the question is this: what or who are you investing in? That's a pretty important question for us, right? What or who are we investing in? Treasures on earth, treasures in heaven. Jesus goes on, though, and he says, the eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? Again, we're talking about, are we living for the kingdom? Are we living for the world? And we've looked at a singular investment, and Jesus moves on to a singular vision, right? Moves from treasures to our sight. And again, we have two options. Will we see clearly, or will it be somewhat clouded, or maybe not even see at all? Joni, who is here with us this morning, and I asked permission, but Joni here regularly struggles, right, with her eyesight, and certainly she's done whatever she could through medical means to be able to help improve her eyesight. Why? Because while she can get around on her own some, and certainly on the arm of her loving husband, so much better, it's still, life is still easier. Life can still be at times better when we can see what? Clearly. I didn't used to wear glasses. So when I was 16, all of a sudden I realized I was getting headaches, and found out that honestly, I think I had 20/20 vision at that time, but I had one eye that just didn't focus the way it was supposed to. So one lens was just completely glass, and the other lens had just a little bit of correction to help give some focus. Today, you'd have to hope that I had memorized the entire message, because I wouldn't be able to read this very well, right? But when Jesus talks about having healthy eyes, healthy here means to have a clear vision, to have singular vision. Jesus is saying that we need to be somebody who is singularly focused in devotion to Him, singularly focused in devotion to Him. You know what this word can also mean, though? And certainly does in this context, in so many others throughout the New Testament. But it also means to be generous, with the implication that when we see clearly, or our hearts are right, and our heart and eye, honestly, in the Bible so many times are interchangeable. But when our hearts, when our eye is right, that we will grow in our relationship with Jesus, knowing and obeying Him and delighting in Him. When Jesus talks about an unhealthy eye, the literal meaning for unhealthy is stingy. Stingy. Back in their day, the word was an expression at times used by the Jews that could mean give you the evil eye or the stink eye. Okay, I like that phrase, stink eye, right? And a person with a stink eye meant that they were selfish with their money, is what it meant. And so Jesus is saying this. Jesus is saying that a person who is materialistic and greedy, that will lead them to being spiritually blind. And so Jesus goes on to say, if then the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? I mean, how great is that darkness? What he's saying is a person who lives this way, since it brings darkness, this person doesn't even know that what they're doing is wrong because they're living in so much darkness. And as my wife told me as we were leaving a hospital room one time after visiting with somebody, and the person was sharing all different kinds of what I thought were crazy facts, and I'm not a medical person, so I'm just rolling with the punches here, but my wife knows. Right? She understood. And I just said to her, why didn't you say something to this lady? I mean, she was out there. And here's what my wife said, and I'll never forget, and I've now applied this in my life in so many different ways, is you don't argue with crazy. Okay, so you don't argue with crazy. And a person who is in this kind of darkness, you can't argue with this person because it goes beyond reasoning. Because it is a heart issue. It is a focus issue. And it will take more than just a good argument to change their lifestyle, their attitude, the way in which they are living. And so let me ask you a second question here this morning. And it's this, is how's your vision? How is your vision today? How clearly are you seeing the difference between the things of this world and the things of Christ? The things on earth and the things in heaven. How well is your eyesight this morning? Finally, in this section, we look at today, anyway, is Jesus says this: no one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. So we've seen Jesus say, hey, you need to have a singular investment. You need to have a singular vision. And now he was talking about having a singular service. And when we read this, don't think in terms of a boss, right? Don't think in terms of an employer. You know, you can have more than one job. And if you put in the time that you were supposed to put in there, accomplish those things, you've done what you're supposed to for that job, and you do the same thing at another job and put in the hours that you were supposed to be there and do the things that you were supposed to do. You know, you can please two bosses at the same time. But this is not talking about bosses or jobs. This is referring to a master, a slave relationship, that the master actually does what? He owns the slave, that everything that you have, everything that you even are, it belonged to the master. And who is our master? Well, it's not you. It is the Lord Jesus Christ himself that owns us, right? That we have given our lives completely and fully to, that we would be his slave, his bond servant. And so we are bound to him. And so when we look through the lens of what the term master originally meant, Jesus leaves little room. Okay, Jesus actually leaves no room for who you can serve. Because Jesus is very emphatic here in this passage that no one can. He says, you can serve him alone or really not at all. You can choose to serve him alone or really not at all. And yet, we are used to, in this world, just trying to play at times even both sides, trying to keep the door cracked open, that we like to say that, hey, what is good for me today, maybe I'll want something different tomorrow, and so I'm gonna leave my options open here. In politics, we talk about walking across the aisle, working with somebody from the other party, and so many times that is a good thing, is a great thing, because they're trying to do something that benefits people from both viewpoints. But when it comes to Jesus, you can't walk across the aisle of this world. You can't keep one foot in the world and then expect to serve the Lord at the same time, because there is no common ground between the two. No common ground. And so Jesus says, you cannot serve both God and money. John Calvin said, where riches hold the dominion of the heart, God has lost his authority. Again, you cannot serve both God and money. One or the other will gain mastery over the other. So let me give you just one final question. And it's this: are you in service to money, material things, or in service alone to God? Which at times seems like that'd be an easy question for us to answer. And yet with all the influence that we have from the world, at times has become so clouded for all believers, especially here in the United States. I know this is the pursuit of the almighty dollar has shipwrecked more than one person, family. Our attitudes, our actions when it comes to money, they tell so much about us. It's a pretty good barometer of our spiritual condition or where our heart is. Right, growing up, I always remembered my pastor saying you could tell a lot about somebody from their checkbook. I don't use that phrase because I wrote one check in the last several months because everything's just done online or through a card. But you can tell a lot from somebody's statement for sure.